Hello, Veronica. Welcome to the program.
Thanks so much for having me, Eric.
Yeah, so you wrote a book, a pocket guide to Rerum Novarum is the official name of it. And so we want to talk about that. Before we do, though, I should know this, but what actually do you do at Sophia?
What exactly would you say you do here?
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, right. Yeah, that's right. That's from Office Space. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Sorry, it's just bad association, but
Good reference, though. Yeah.
I have two roles. So I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Sophia Institute, which means I kind of just help oversee all the different departments in our various apostolates, Sophia Institute Press, Sophia Teachers, Crisis, fraternity publications, Benedictus, all these amazing things that I get to be a part of. And then I'm the executive director of Sophia Teachers, which is an organization that serves Catholic educators. We try to just kind of make their jobs easier, help give them materials to authentically teach the Catholic faith to their students, live it out better themselves, and help their students do the same.
Okay, I should have known that. I know, but
Oh,
that's great. And Sophia, I mean, for those who don't know, it's awesome. Sophia Institute Press, and I don't say that just because they've published my last few books, but they really do have just great books that they're publishing. And the Sophia Institute for Teachers is doing great work helping Catholic teachers all around the country. It really is amazing. I remember. Okay, I'm just going to tell this story because I think it's kind of funny. I remember when I first was approached by Charlie McKinney, who's the president of Sophia Institute Press, about running Crisis. And what was funny is I told him, first of all, I didn't even know that. And he had published one of my books. I didn't know who Charlie was. But also, I was like, Sophia, I remember them back in the day from the 90s and 2000s. And I kind of thought they had dropped off the map. And I think they did for a little while.
they
And
almost did. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, really almost went under. And then
Mhm.
Charlie was like, yeah, but we're changing that. And then it's like Sophia's been everywhere the past, 5 years particularly, but it's just become the dominant Catholic publisher in my mind. And again, I'm not just saying that because they publish my books, but really just great stuff. So anyway, that saying you're doing a good job. So that's basically the point of that. So
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, it really has been a really exciting time to work at Sophia.
yeah, I mean, just great. And speaking of books that Sophia Institute Press publishes, that's what we want to talk about is the Pocket Guide to Rerum Novarum. But really, just Rerum Novarum is on everybody's mind right now because of our new Pope. Pope Leo XIV, of course, took the name of Leo XIII, and he specifically said that's who he's kind of looking towards.
Mm-hmm.
And he's looking towards how Leo the 13th had to address the Industrial Revolution, and now he's addressing, going to address the AI revolution and all that. And so people have been talking a lot about Leo the 13th, Rerum Novarum. And I think this might have been one of the reasons you guys published this and you wrote this, is there's a lot of misconceptions about Rerum Novarum. And so why don't you first just kind of give us a background of Leo the 13th and Rerum Novarum, like why he wrote it, kind of what the purpose of it is, what's the context of when he wrote it.
Yeah, great question. So Pope Leo is writing around the Industrial Revolution, and and specifically the challenges that he saw in society that were kind of brought about by the Industrial Revolution, the effects that it was having on families, on individuals, and specifically working people, and what he was responding to was not really only that, but he was responding to the response that that socialism was proposing at the time. So you could say like he was responding to the Industrial Revolution, and that's true, but he was also responding to people who were claiming that socialism was the answer, right? So that the challenges of the Industrial Revolution, so these inhumane working conditions, the plight of poor people, this is obviously a legitimate, good, important, necessary concern for the church. and for humanity. And so, but what he saw was socialism, socialists, and he was writing before, we saw a lot of the horrors that would come, the Bolshevik Revolution and communism. It was really kind of prescient and prophetic. But what he saw was like the seeds, these arguments and these ideas that the socialists were putting forth were actually going to harm people, the people that they were claiming to help. It was actually going to harm them. And so Leo was writing about why socialism is the wrong response to the challenges of the Industrial Revolution that particular time.
Yeah, that's interesting because if you look at the second half of the 19th century, that really is when socialism is kicking off. Marx, of course, is 1850s, 60s, that time period. And you see it growing, particularly in Europe, in Russia. Obviously, as you said, it doesn't kick off until, really become powerful as a kind of a nation state power until after World War II. World War I. But like that really was in the air of Europe at the time, was socialism is the answer to the problems of the Industrial Revolution. I think though that's because I even said that Rerum Novarum was like written as response to the Industrial Revolution, but I think that's a good correction that's not just what it was. It's really a response, like you said, yes, the problems of the Industrial Revolution, but also the problems of socialism. So I think that's a great point. Now, and we'll get back. I want to get back to the socialism in a minute, but like, what would you say then? Like he's writing this, and so what are his major themes? Is it mostly a condemnation of socialism? Is it condemnation of industrial revolution? Is it more nuanced than that? Like, what are the major themes that he's talking about in the document?
Yeah, it's really interesting because there's several themes, and I'll just kind of tick through them in order. But the first one, which is almost half the document, is this like just full-throated defense of private property, just really unapologetic defense of it, and kind of staking this claim that, not only we're not just saying it's acceptable and we'll tolerate it, but no, it's actually like a good, and it's the way that the poor, needy will be able to improve their lot in life. And by denying them private property, you're taking away their dignity, their ability to, to support themselves and support their families and chart a better path forward. Then in the second half, he kind of goes through the family, why property rights, if they in here, if they reside in one man, then how much more so do they in a father, right? And so the families, kind of right to self-determination and to chart their own path. And then he kind of gets into subsidiarity, solidarity. How can then the working people, how can they form associations, which we might call unions today? What should that look like? How should they be governed? What are the responsibilities of employers and the responsibilities of employees? So that's kind of how he rounds it out with this sense that these associations have to be governed from Christian principles, or they're going to fail utterly. And same for all of society, that until we return to putting Christ at the center, nothing is going to come to any good.
Yeah. So why private property though? Like, okay, I think probably most of the people who are listening to this are, capitalists on some level or accept that private property is important. But why is it important? Like, why is Leo say in the Catholic tradition, why does it say that private property, like not the American answer, we have a right to it or like that, but why is it actually important for the poor, particularly, that private property is defended?
Well, it's interesting because, Leo is coming from this place, this very Catholic place, that all of our rights actually flow from responsibilities. And so anything that we legitimately have a right to, like private property or like religion, to worship our Creator, it comes from a responsibility. We have a responsibility to God, and therefore we have the right to practice our religion. We have a responsibility correspondingly to ourselves and our families to care for ourselves and for each other. And therefore we must then, it flows from that, have a right to the goods of the earth, not just now, but in the future. So Leo talks about how, because we have this ability to plan, man, unlike any of the other animals, we have the ability to look into the future and, make good decisions about how we're going to use our resources. So therefore, we must have a right to not just, what we can gather today, to live as like hunter gatherers, but to establish a home, a civilization that's going to, endure. And so that's where our property rights come from. And it's only through that ability to control the fruits of your labor. He has this beautiful part where he talks about how, when you, and other philosophers make this point too, that when you sort of put yourself, into the land, or you build something, like that's properly yours, right? And it's through that the poor, but all of us, everyone, is able to just kind of have that self-determination, that ability to provide for oneself and one's family. So that's kind of the crux of why we have property rights, is because we have a responsibility to care for ourselves and our families, our children.
Now, okay, so private property is the kind of the linchpin of capitalism. I mean, of free market economics, everything. Private property is, without it, the whole
Mm.
system falls apart. That's like the most essential ingredient for any capitalistic society. However, I've heard from everybody on the internet, so it must be true, that Pope Leo condemns capitalism as much as he condemns socialism in Rerum Novarum and other places.
Mm.
And so yet you're saying that he's talking about private property. So does he actually does he condemn capitalism? And or does he kind of half condemn it? Like, what does he say about capitalism and its relationship to private property?
Yes, I had heard the same thing. And just to, to kind of go back to that point you made about the claim that Rerum Novarum, condemns capitalism and socialism equally. And so me personally, just being I'm first generation in this country, my parents are Cuban exiles. And so I have like a really, fairly intimate experience with communism in practice and how that can affect people. And I'd read other encyclicals of the church, pretty strongly condemning communism. So I was like, how I must be missing something. How can it be that even-handed of a document? So that was one of my motivations for reading it. Actually, when Pope Leo XIV said that that's why he was taking his name and this document. So I was like, okay, I've got to read this for myself. What does it actually say? And so I don't think it's even really fair to say that he condemns capitalism. It's more, I mean, he definitely criticizes the excesses of capitalism. And I just think condemns is too strong a word, but more like when you have this tendency to put profit over people and forget that the human person, has to be the center, and the reason for society is the human person. When you cast that aside, when you have such a great power imbalance, between these wealthy capitalists and between capital and labor, then something has to be done. Something's not right here. This just can never really be fair. But given that half the document is about protecting the right to private property. I mean, he says it has to be held sacred, inviolable. Like, these are really strong terms. I had to read it a few times to make sure I was understanding. And capitalism is the one economic system that that isn't based on coercion in some way, and allows you to use your property for the good of others, who can freely exchange. If you create something of value and someone else chooses to buy it, and both people, profit from that transaction. I mean, I suppose that's, or at least believe they're going to profit from it, right? I guess you could say that's an idealistic view, but at its heart, if yeah, to your point, like, if you can't, if private property is the foundation of a capitalist economy. And so it kind of strains credibility to say that he's condemning capitalism, when
Right.
the whole point of his encyclical is that if you want to help the poor, the one thing you must do is protect private property and hold it sacred and inviolable.
Right. Okay, so condemning socialism, criticizing capitalism. Okay, I'm just gonna be blunt here. I'm a pretty radical free market defender, and so I might not even like his criticisms so of capitalism. I will put that out there. But like an example you gave was the idea of putting profit over people, and that's something
Mm,
very commonly said in the
mhm,
Catholic world.
mm,
But of course, from a free market perspective, profit is not considered this evil.
mm,
It's the incentive so that you work, so that you do things. It's like the whole point is that we're a fallen race. We don't we need incentives to work and to we're not all just like living in this Garden of Eden where we're just like, hey, I'm gonna make something to help somebody else out. That's just not the way it works. However, if we make something and people want it and they really need it, like I make a better type of shoe, and it really helps people, that it lasts longer and it's better and stuff like that. Well, the way I know that is because it's profit, because people buy it and they realize, hey, this is what I want, and so I make profit, and that incentivizes me to make more and more. If nobody buys it, it could be the best shoe in the world, but it tells me it's not really helping anybody, or I'm
mhm.
pricing it way too high or something like that. It's not worth what I'm pricing it at, and so I don't have profit and I go out of business, which I should go out of business because people
Yes.
didn't want it. So, like, how do you know how, like, Leo, or maybe even just generally people who follow Leo the 13th, like, what would be an example of like an illegitimate way for a Catholic to put profit over people? Like, I don't have a lot of great examples in my own head. That's what I'm wondering.
Mm. Sure. Well, first of all, I love everything you said, and I cannot say that I disagree with any of it. And yes, profit is a moral good in that it's evidence that you've created value. You've taken resources and you've done something innovative with them. You've been entrepreneurial, and it's a sign that people found it valuable. So agree. An example of putting profit over people would be that Leo mentions in his encyclical, inhumane working hours, for example. Really bad, dangerous conditions in factories that don't take into account who the worker is. It wouldn't be politically correct to say now, but he talks about how men and women need different working conditions for children, neglecting the need for children to receive an education and having them work, again, really long hours in poor conditions. These would be examples. Even today, another example could be not taking into account an individual's situation when determining their wages. So, again, from the encyclical, an example of this would be refusing to pay a wage that can support, the term he uses is a well-behaved wage earner and his family. And so it's interesting because, under Rerum Novarum, it would probably be illegal to follow some of its prescriptions because it would probably run afoul of labor law in the U.S. to
Right.
pay two people a different salary for the same job because one is a single woman, say, and the other is a father of seven. Catholic social teaching would say you must pay the father of seven more, as a as just a way of recognizing his humanity and who he is and what his responsibilities are. So, but yes, the refusal to pay a just wage, in that sense, would be putting profits over people. But and interestingly, I think we also have to give credit to capitalism there for not eradicating it, right? But for making those conditions that I just described, much less common and not as proliferated as they were before because of the competition that is a part of capitalism, is that just as companies have to compete for customers, they also have to compete for employees. And so in addition to the good work that some of the good work that some unions have done in the past, and that the betterment of conditions, the weekend, for example, or more humane working hours, also came about because people have a choice about where to work. And so
Right.
companies that want to attract attract talent, attract good workers, if they offer better conditions, it's that free market that allows that to flourish. So a nod to your free market there, Eric.
Right. So it's not necessarily even saying, or maybe he is. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Leo isn't necessarily saying that the government has to step in and order certain like wage levels depending on a person's background and their situation, but saying that Catholic employers should take these things into consideration when they're hiring, when they're paying, and things like that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I
okay,
think that's right. There's
okay,
not a, because another misunderstanding that I had come across is that Rerum Novarum says that it's just or even necessary for government to set a minimum wage, but he says no such thing, and it's more
okay,
a role for the government to step in sort of, I guess, what you could call like the really egregious cases where private organizations and associations have been unable to protect people.
okay. I can't help myself as far as like just I feel like I'm just trying. I'm disagreeing with Pope Leo too much, but I'm Catholic, so I'm like trying to set my thoughts properly. But like the just wage thing, because I remember talking to my kids
Mm,
about this one time, and like
mhm,
specifically like paying people depending on like their background. Like
mm,
I admit I don't like that. I recoil from that. I've run businesses before in the past, and I feel like there's a couple reasons. First, I feel like if it was generally that, you pay more to, let's say, a dad of 7 kids, which is what I am, to, let's say, some, kid who's single, somebody who's single, but
mm,
we're saying we're identical workers as far as what we can produce and everything like
mhm,
that.
mhm,
Well, if I'm a company, I'm hiring the single guy then, if it's like if it's understood, because I get the exact same amount of work, and I get, but I actually can pay less than I'm paying, because the other guy, I'm not paying him more because of something he produces for me. I can understand somebody thinking that. Also, like I feel like there's a little bit of a knowledge problem here in that. What if that single guy who's in his 30s actually supports like his family back home? Let's say he's, legal immigrant or something like that, or even not even legal. Maybe he's in Ohio and his family lives in California or something like that. And his, he's basically sending his pay, a lot of his pay, to them, like maybe his brother's in a terrible situation and, is
mm,
disabled, and he's supporting that family, and he's supporting someone, and he's doing all of that, but he's not advertising that when he walks in. And so, like, all of a sudden, I'm paying him less than the dad with 7 kids, but really, he's got the same obligation, similar maybe financial obligations. But I don't know that as the employer. And like, there's a certain, how can I know that? Like, am I going to really grill people at their interview about, I mean, as you said, it would run afoul of labor laws, but let's take that away for a second. Am I going to really grill him about, okay, first, I want to know how you could do this job, but second, I want to know your whole background, all your financial obligations, and all that. And maybe it's a guy who's got 7 kids and he's been terrible with his money. He's been very irresponsible with it. And he's in a really bad bind. And he's like, oh
mm,
man, I need to make this much in order to make ends meet. Why? Because he has like loan payments that are like through the roof, because he's like blew out credit cards in the past on vacations and stuff. And I know Leo addresses that when he says the well behaved
mm.
worker. So, but like, those are all things that come to my mind immediately when we start getting these discussions. And I kind of wonder what would Leo, I mean, you can't know for sure, but what would Pope Leo say to me? Like, would you just say, Eric, shut up, you need to just learn Catholicism better? Or would he have like arguments against it? Or would he say, okay, I mean, what do you think Leo would say in that situation?
Yeah, no, I mean, those are valid points. I mean, getting that human relationship, though, I think, between employer and employee is, and the moral qualities of everything we do with our money is, I think he would return to those 2 points and say, hey, I'm writing in this time of the Industrial Revolution where we're trying to make it that humans aren't cogs and machines, right? Well, Eric, you're talking about people like they're cogs and machines,
Right.
Joe here, even I don't believe this, Eric. I'm talking like,
You
but
know, it's
I
fine.
think that
I
I
mean, I
do think,
might be. Very
yeah,
much. I mean, I know when I was an employer, and I had people working for me, I did try to treat them as human beings. But I will say, part of this might be my background, might be a little bit because the first time I worked for a startup internet company in the late '90s during the dot-com boom, and we blew up. I was working in a friend's basement, just he and I. And, he started it and I came to work for him. And then literally we had 300 employees within like 2 years. It was just insane. And I was like 26 or 27. It was crazy. But I still remember, and I hope this person doesn't listen to this podcast. I don't think anybody will. They do. But this employee came to me and she wanted a raise simply because they had some financial issues in her and her husband. And I kind of gathered from talking to her, it's kind of was because they had been financially kind of irresponsible. Maybe I'm being judgmental, but like, it didn't seem like it was like, oh, say my husband got in an accident and now whatever. It was more just like, we got these college loans and we got stuff, and she just wanted to raise for that reason. And I remember being like offended by that. And I was like, you work hard. Because there was another woman who worked for me who was like the best employee ever. And she never once asked for a raise or anything like that. She never once. And I was like, I will do anything to keep her on board. I'll pay, and I made sure she got raises, stuff like that. And so it was like this whole thing of like, I really felt like her coming to me and asking for a raise because of her personal background, it just rubbed me the wrong way. And I don't think I ever got over it.
No, I can see that. I mean, I think she's appealing to your, whether she knew it or not. I mean, that's more a question of charity rather than
Right.
justice, right? Like, yeah.
And she didn't know I was a jerk. So yeah, I do think it was that. And I felt like that actually that's a great point. And what I'm trying to say is like, a business is not a charity.
Mm.
I mean, obviously if it's a charity run as business, but I mean, a business in general, like we were an internet company, we're not a charity. Like, I do think businesses should help charities. Like, you should take some of your profits and donate them to charities. And absolutely, you should do that. But the business itself shouldn't, in my opinion, should not be considered a charity. Like, the employees are like charitable clients. They're part of the company, like trying to make with the purpose of trying to, whatever it is we're producing, to produce the best to satisfy our customers as best as possible. That's how I kind of look at it. And I mean, maybe Leo would tell me you gotta like look a little bit bigger than that. I don't know. So anyway, I know I'm getting off on this, but like,
No, I think he'd agree with you, for the record. I think he would agree with you. And I don't think that the examples that you gave there, and they're probably not uncommon, right? But that's not what Rerum Novarum would advocate for, because again, there is that frequent return to the well-behaved wage earner. Like, that is the condition or the responsibility of the employer to the employee, and not to to sort of enable or to support those bad moral choices would not be something that it would advocate.
And Leo would probably be supportive of that. Tell me I think it's what you said earlier, like in that example I gave before of the guy with 7 kids, but then also the single guy who's supporting his family.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Like, the employer would get to know the employee and would
Right.
discover that over time because they're investing in their lives on some level, and then might say, listen, I'm going to give you a raise. Not because the guy was like, I came to him like, oh, I got this sad story or something like that, but more just because it's like, hey, I want you as an employee to stay with me. I know you have this situation, and like, you might go to somebody else who can pay you more. I might lose you and you're a good employee. So I'm going to, for that reason, pay you more than maybe I originally agreed to, just simply because. So is that kind of more the atmosphere that Leo would kind of see?
Yeah, I think so. And also that's also just a beautiful testimony to the free market, to your original point. It's very, I think, quite compatible, these things. Because yeah, in that you're not treating your employees like cogs and machines, you're just seeing them as a means to an end to accomplish whatever you guys are there to do, but just always regarding them in their humanity. And yeah, to your point, that might mean that you pay them more because you value them as an employee and you don't want them to go somewhere else, which of course they can, because we're in a free market.
Right. And that's the case with, like, when you run a business, you want to treat your employees very well. It's really stupid from a business standpoint not to treat them well.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said about those 2 women who worked for me, and 2 examples, one was great. And I did everything I could, and she stayed with us. And honestly, the woman who asked for the raise, she later left us not that long afterwards. And like, it's like, I wasn't that upset about it because, it didn't really harm us that much. And, maybe she got a better deal somewhere else, but like, I wanted to keep the top employees because they just helped, our business, the hardworking ones, things like that. So I want to apply those, something you said about like the crazy working hours and things like that was existent back then. Well, we kind of are back to that. And I'm thinking of particularly one of my favorite companies, which is SpaceX. Elon is like well known for, he drives his employees. I mean, like really almost in the ground. I mean, they work insane hours at these companies. I mean, he expects them to basically their whole life to be, working for the company and stuff like that. That's, I mean, I've read, a book about him and I've heard it say, he said these things. So I think it's true. But like, at the same time, so that's all true. That seems to go against kind of what we're talking about here, what Pope Leo was talking about. But at the same time, people are lining up to work for him. And they're very excited because, I mean, you get to build a rocket to Mars. I mean, how much cooler can that be? So, like, what is the balance there? Like, should we condemn Elon because he's treating these employees so harshly? Or is it like, well, they're free to work somewhere else in our market, they choose to work there voluntarily. It's not like he's forcing them to work there. So is there a problem here? Is it, or we're like, well, if that's what people want to do, that's what they can do.
Yeah, I think that choice element that you mentioned, I think is really key, because when Leo the 13th is writing, he's talking about people who really don't have a choice. And so I think that the people who are working at SpaceX, I don't know, and maybe I'm being stereotypical, but I'm guessing that these are probably all or mainly young men. Maybe some young women too, probably not having started families yet, or maybe they have and they want to work really hard to make a lot of money to support that family really well. They still retain, though, I think in our day and age, and I think Leo would agree, that they're retaining that agency. They do have a meaningful choice to work somewhere else if they want. It's not a matter. So he's writing about people who are trying to feed their families, that literally,
Right.
Are a paycheck away from starving, from not being able to put food on the table. And so in that kind of situation, and all the factories have the same conditions at that time. Like, so you can't just say, oh, I'm going to go work at a different factory, because they're all the same then. And so he was really trying to reach people's hearts at that time and to affect that change that, which then, was kind of taken up and did lead to some important reforms. And now, we look back and it's a very different time for us, because the church was on the leading edge of that issue, I think. But nowadays, I think it's, I don't think that the same critique would be coming from Leo. I think just because of that, in fact, I think he might, as long as they're not, I mean, seriously, as long as they're not neglecting their religious duties, as long as they're still keeping the Sabbath holy, they're putting, they're keeping their prayer life front and center, their wives or spouses and children are well cared for. If they're working long hours, I mean, that's actually good for the family, So I think he'd be down. I think he'd be all right with
Okay.
space.
Yeah. And like, good, because I didn't want to condemn SpaceX because I like, no. Well, I mean, it's interesting because, as you said, probably the typical employee at SpaceX is a highly educated engineer type who
Mm,
can get jobs at a lot of places.
mhm.
They're not like, desperate to find a job. They want to work there because they want to do something that they think is very important. And that can be okay. Like you say, as long as the basics of Catholic life are obviously taken care of. So, and the truth is people are different personalities. I just read the other day where a lot of like, CEO, like founder types of companies, these high power people, they're basically saying there is no such thing as work-life balance in their world. Like they're basically saying that if you want to build a company like an Elon or something like that, a Steve Jobs, Larry Ellison, whoever, then you're not going to have a work-life balance. And I think that's actually refreshing that they're honest about it, because it's true. And but because they also, if you read them more carefully, they say, listen, that's not for everybody. The most important thing is your family. That's great. We're not saying anything against that, but you're not going to build some, a SpaceX or something like that. And I think that's all legitimate. I mean, obviously we're not endorsing Elon Musk's personal life in any way here.
No.
But at the same time, it's like, if you are, especially if you're like a single man and you have an idea for a company and you want to just go crazy building it, you think it really will help the world or whatever, go for it. I mean, there's nothing, you can work 80, 90 hours a week and that you're not violating any Catholic social teaching by doing so. But
Yeah.
for those of us who don't want to do that, who would rather work, because I worked crazy hours for a while with that internet startup. I mean, yeah, it was insane. We had actually back in the day, we had these beepers. Remember, you're old enough. You know.
Yes.
And so like it was like doctors are the only ones who had them, but then we started getting because we had set up with when a server we were hosting company, a server went down, certain people would get a beep to say, okay, you got to get this back
Mhm.
up.
Mhm.
And at the beginning, I was literally the only guy who had a beeper. And so like 24/7, that thing goes off. I have to get up. I have to immediately start working on it. And early on, it was like going off. I mean, all the time. I mean, just all through the night and stuff like that. And my work habit back then was I'd get up in the morning, go right down to my basement. I was working from home, work, come up for meals, and then be there until bedtime. And it was not healthy. And I'm not doing that anymore. But I was young, and we were
I
just
you know, I
married.
also think this is a Gen X thing, right?
Yeah,
I think
yeah, right.
that us Gen Xers, we
Yeah.
have like what at in around my office, we'll have these conversations about work-life balance and how do you keep your work life separate from your personal life? And I admit I'm kind of like, wait, what do you mean? Like this is my life. Like
Yeah, right.
so but yeah, you have to watch that and keep it in check and like you said, just
Yeah.
not
And of course I was working from home, so it made it a little better. I was around. But like as the kids started getting older, I definitely was like, okay, I'm not doing this anymore. I gotta be a little more balanced on that. Anyway, I want to talk about something else that you mentioned, which was the importance of the family. So, I people who watch this podcast know I have libertarian leanings, but one of my biggest problems libertarians is like to focus on the individual.
mm,
Whereas like, the communist socialists, they focus on like the community. But
collective.
I feel like this is where Leo is really saying in the Catholic world, there is a third way. I don't like the third way terminology a lot of times because it's like, I don't know, they're trying to be like, we're not capitalists, we're not socialists. But like, I do feel like this is it, the emphasis on the family. How did Leo kind of see in Catholic society in general, see the family as kind of the central unit of the economy and our society?
Yeah, he says so many times, I kind of lost count in the document, that the family precedes the state. Like that is, he has this theme that he goes to. And so really like, you know, we're coming up on the 250th anniversary of the Declaration. You're probably aware next year. So there's a lot of talk about, about the philosophy of the Declaration and yes, it's individualism and just this idea that we're like John Locke and Jefferson and men of those times might have said, we're born into a state of nature, but really we're born into a family. Like that is the natural condition of every human being. And so yeah, the family being that fundamental unit is a recurring theme and is really wonderful because it encapsulates so many principles of Catholic social teaching like subsidiarity and just the dignity of the human person, all these beautiful concepts and things that are so important in society, like marriage being held sacred and the education of children and so it's just it was really affirming in that way, as a Catholic to read it because yeah, this is just the most precious thing and it was front and center in this encyclical, which today like you never really hear about that part of it. And yeah, it's just a really beautiful testimony that he gives just about how central and irreplaceable the family is and how it came before the state. And most of the time, it doesn't need the state's help. Yeah, I know there's, just different points of view on to what extent the state should be involved in, even being involved in marriage at all. I think Leo would say, I would agree, that yeah, the state has an interest in the well-being of children and the rearing of children and their development. And so since that is a legitimate end of government, then yeah, the husband, wife, that family unit is the fundamental cell of society.
Yeah, an actual marriage, not the fake marriage that
Of
we have these
course.
days.
Yes.
And I think though some of the things we were talking about kind of refer back to the family in that we were talking about the wages given to an employee. You're not just looking at the employee, the individual, but you're looking at the family situation, the work hours, the weight conditions have to do with like their ability to be a good father or, you know, in the family and a husband, things like that, wherever the case may be. So I do think all that stuff, family is kind of the central point there because it is the basis of society. So I think that's good. And you brought up another point though, and this is the one that, you know, people talk about, some Catholics do, but I'm not sure how much we understand it. And that's subsidiarity. Like, okay, so is it true? Like, it seems like today you get your more progressive Catholics, they emphasize the solidarity aspect. The more conservative Catholics emphasize the subsidiarity aspect. Is it really a case where it's equal, or does Leo have more of an emphasis on one than the other? Does one like serve the other, or how do those two things kind of relate to each other?
I think like so many Catholic things, it's a both and. I guess like when I read it, the subsidiarity part does maybe it just speaks to me more strongly, but I think they're both there, right? Because but they don't contradict. But there's a proper ordering of things. And so, you know, you can even just go to something as simple as the 10 commandments, and there are specific commandments to honor your parents, you know, don't commit adultery. Like our family units are that most fundamental thing. And so this idea of subsidiarity, that the lowest or the smallest possible community or society, you know, should handle things, and then only if they can't should a higher ordered body step in, you know, or agency or level of whatever it is. Respecting that, it can sometimes be difficult and lead to things that are you know, unhappy, because if someone's not you know, doing the best job that they could as a wife or a mother or a husband or a father, but really nothing can change the fact that that is the father's responsibility, or the, you know, the parents' responsibility. So kind of respecting that is super important as far as like understanding subsidiarity and the need for those higher levels to respect the lower levels and step in when needed to support, but not try to overrun. And so I see multiple warnings about that from Leo, about how it would distort the role of government to be, you know, in like to make government a charity, basically.
Right.
Would and obviously, you know, answering the socialist call to just eradicate private property, which is one of the things he was responding to at the time. And for the government to basically enforce that, you know, quote unquote, equality in society would completely distort and pervert society and be super harmful. So I don't know if that came
Yeah.
out well.
So, yeah. I kind of want to apply that though then to today. Like, how would you say, after like really studying Rerum Novarum, how would you say today, for example, what are some examples of where like in America, like we're violating the principles that he is laying out there, whether it be in government or the economy or whatever? What would you say are some like big ones where you'd say that really doesn't jibe with what Leo was talking about in Rerum Novarum?
Oh man, there
Or
are
is it more like, you know, give me 400? Yeah, yeah.
I mean, direct assistance from government. Like, who is it that did the veto of the Texas seed bill? Was that Grover Cleveland?
I don't remember. Yeah, I know what you're talking about, though.
There's
Yeah.
a president who vetoed a federal. I'm going to answer your question in a moment, but I'm just kind of working my way there. It was post Dust Bowl. I could be getting the history wrong, but there had been a drought in Texas, right? And the Texas farmers had eaten their seed corn, and so Congress took up this bill to give them direct assistance. And I believe it was Grover Cleveland, vetoed it. But his veto message, everybody should read, because I don't think he was Catholic, but it had some really great Catholic principles in it. And one of the things he does is he makes this point that when the government takes on this role of charity, it deprives the people of the bonds of brotherhood that would be there if we were actually helping each other instead of sort of outsourcing it to
Right.
a level of government. Now, I think local government is a completely different thing. State government, like there's proper powers associated with different levels of government. And so I'm not saying that local governments providing, direct assistance or kind of welfare safety nets, I'm not saying that that would violate subsidiarity at all. Like it's probably very much in keeping with it. But federal government, totally different thing. So that might be one example. I think education is another. I have maybe some strong opinions.
Yeah, I'm sure you do.
But yeah, like there are things that are really rightfully the domain of the family that and all you have to do is kind of look at like the Great Society, these government programs that effectively tried to replace the family, and the intent. Actually, I can't know what's in anybody's hearts, but I think sometimes people have trouble looking past the intent of a law. Like, oh, this law was intended to help families, or this law is intended to help the poor, but does it? So asking that question, I think, is important. But even just, at a more basic fundamental level, thinking of subsidiarity, which I think federalism is it's not the exact same thing, but our federal system, with the national government having its powers that are proper to it, and state governments and local governments, I think that kind of approximates, is pretty on par with what a good understanding of subsidiarity might be. It's like the reasons that the national government has the powers it does is because those are things only the national government should do, like make war, the post office, those things. If you look at the powers of the federal government, the enumerated ones, they're actually pretty few compared to the states, which are numerous and indefinite, according to James Madison. There's a reason for that. So yeah.
So there's many. We could go on and on about those, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Okay, now I'm going to ask a kind of a funny question, I think, which is, we talked about at the beginning how Pope Leo XIV took the name, particularly like kind of as a callback to Leo XIII's responding to the Industrial Revolution, as you said, and also the response to that, and kind of like the AI revolution that's going on now. Okay, so Pope Leo XIV calls you up, and he's like, Veronica, I want you to be my top advisor when I'm writing my encyclical about AI and like how we should respond to this revolution, this work revolution, based on the principles of Rerum Novarum, stuff like that. What's like the advice you give him overall? Like, what does he say? What should he say, do you think, when it comes to like how AI is changing our economy, our work life, things like that, and applying Catholic social teaching to it?
So, well, first of all, that's a totally ridiculous question, but yeah, I think
it's going to happen. I think get you on the horn before he's going to watch this interview. He's going to get you on the horn before you know it.
Yeah, I need to get him a copy. But there's two, I think, general like forms of AI, right? There's AI and generative AI, and the purposes and the places where they're used, right? So I would say I think there's artificial intelligence that helps. Let me see. I want to say this correctly. That helps people think or work with the precision of a machine. So like AI that reads X-rays or, CT scans or weather maps, things that require a person to have, really almost like superhuman discernment and, to be able to like detect changes in patterns, like where a person needs to be more like a machine to do a good job well, great, bring in the AI, right? Because that's actually that's a help. That is I would call that just a clear good. But then on the flip side, AI that tries to make the computer appear human or do things that only a human can do. I would say only a human can do, like art, or philosophy or theology. So where there's and even more like sinisterly, like where this idea that you would have AI teachers or AI, doing anything directly with children where there's not a human like intermediary, but you've got this this machine that is essentially presenting itself as human, especially when you have children who might not be able to tell the difference. So that takes my breath away of what could happen in a couple of generations if we forget what it means to be human, so that's probably what I would tell him, to be aware of those two different types or
Right.
applications of AI, and think, is it helping the person be more like a machine? Yes. Or, on the flip side, if it's trying to make if it's trying to make the machine impersonate a person or present
Right.
itself or take on these human tendencies, I would be wary.
I like that distinction. In fact, that's one of my frustrations with the AI discussion. I've been seeing online a lot of what I call the Catholic prophets of AI doom, where it's just like all AI is evil. It's the
Mm,
worst evil. It's going to bring down civilization and stuff. And I'm like, okay, I'm definitely know there's some serious dangers with AI, but like it's just like this generic umbrella that covers everything. And
right.
really, it's like, do you remember this? I always like this example. Do you remember back in the 90s, Microsoft Word had that little Clippy thing?
Yes.
Like, that's not gonna bring down the downfall of society. That's an AI thing. It was dumb, but,
Yes. Yes.
only Gen X and above probably understand that reference anyway. But the point is that, like, I'm hoping, and I think he will. I think Pope Leo, with his background, is gonna understand the distinctions, that he's not gonna just say all AI. I was actually talking to I'm gonna call her out, I don't care. I'm talking to one of my daughters, and she just hates AI, and one of my adult daughters, and she was saying how I'm saying, well, Pope Leo is probably going to write something about this. I think it's going to probably be balanced, a Catholic view. She's like, I hope he just condemns it all and says it all.
Yes.
We have to reject
Yeah.
it all. I'm like, I don't think he's going to do that, but I did think it was kind of funny.
I have a son who I love very much who feels the same as your daughter.
Okay, yeah. I think there's something interesting about that. That some of these
Mhm.
younger people, they really are. I think they might see things a little bit differently than we do, as far as like with technology and stuff, and because they've grown up with it in a different way than
Yes.
we did. We actually grew up
Mhm.
without it, and then we adapted to it, whereas it's been part of their. I assume your children are probably about the same age as mine. So yeah, I think that's interesting, but I also think that yeah, so I think we have to distinction. I think that was great. Your distinction was a very good one, because there's like, I'm thinking of, like, there's some stuff AI can be so good at, like, for example, like the telescopes, like the James Webb telescope and stuff, they
Mm,
they
mm,
like they get so much data. There is no way a human can go through that data, or a ton of humans can go through that data and
right.
make any sense of it. But
Mhm.
an AI program can whip through that stuff and really process it to make it something that humans can be like, okay, this is actually useful information now.
Right, and yeah, and that point too about the ends for which it's used. I mean, that goes for any technology, right?
Yeah,
But yeah,
right.
maybe probably even more so for AI, that it has to be used for a purpose that's good for humanity. You can't separate the means and ends.
Right. And to tie everything together, I just want to note that Sophia Institute Press will be publishing my upcoming book on the Catholic Guide to Artificial Intelligence.
Nice.
So,
That's
that's going to
excellent. I
be,
can't wait to
yeah.
read it.
Yes. It's kind of funny though, because I'm writing it right now. And I told Sophia, I said, I'm definitely, and I'm supposed to get finished by the end of the year, this year, and it'll probably come out in the spring. However, I was like, I kind of want to see if Pope Leo puts something out, because I don't want to have my book come out like in Pope Leo, and I miss Pope Leo, what he says about it, because I think it's going to be very important. So we're kind of waiting on that. So as far as people wondering when it's going to come out, I don't really know, because I was going to say spring, but if it looks like Leo's about to put out a document on AI, I need to. I mean, obviously, we have to use that
Yeah.
as a major guidepost for us in understanding it. So, anyway,
Yeah, that's a tough waiting game. Yeah. Well, you
yeah,
could
I
always do a
know.
second edition.
I mean, the reason I like, if he wasn't going to write for a while, then it's like, well, we just put the book out. But I
Right, I know
saw
they're saying any day now.
there's a news report that's being written, so
Mhm.
that tells me it probably will be out by spring at the latest. So we'll see.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we're going to wrap it up there. But this has been great. So. A Pocket Guide to Rerum Novarum is a great, and really, why don't you just real quick, we didn't really talk too much about the book, which is fine. Why don't you just explain like what the book does? Because I was a little surprised when I got it. It
Mhm.
wasn't what I thought it was going to be, and I liked it, but I just wanted to, why don't you explain what the book is, like how it's like formatted and all that stuff, like what you guys did.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, we wanted people to read the document, so it contains Rerum Novarum. But then it also, like, this is probably trademarked, so I probably shouldn't say this. We also have like kind of like a little Cliff Notes version of it. So if you can kind of picture a left and right side of the book. On one side, you have the text of the encyclical, and then on the left, you have what Leo wrote, which, the vocabulary can be a little challenging, sentence structure, can be a little challenge, well, it can be very challenging, honestly. So there is a very faithful digest, of the key points written in really kind of easy to understand language. So I hope that is a help for anyone who, wants to tackle the document, but with a little support,
Right.
So definitely don't only read the digest, read both, but the little digest can kind of just help you put in context the actual writing of the Pope. And then there's this really cool foreword by one of Pope Leo XIV's former associates, a quick little introduction from me. And so I think it's just so important that this document is like, people cite it all the time. It's really heralded as, this like foundation of quote unquote modern Catholic social teaching. You really have to know what it says, because I just do think there is a lot of misinformation about it. I think not everybody who says things about it that turn out to be wrong is lying or anything. I think it just, it kind of took on a life of its own because it was so seminal, such an important work. But I think it's really important to read it for yourself.
Yeah, and that's why I didn't realize was that this pocket guide, Rerum Novarum, contains the entire encyclical. And
Yes.
so the point of this is to get you to read the encyclical and understand it, not because I thought it was going to be a booklet of you telling us what it actually says, but that's not what it is. It's like, okay, here's what you read it, and then I'll help you understand. So like, because some of the language, it's over 130 years old or something like that. So it's going to have some language and just how people wrote back then and stuff like that. So I think it was very great because that's what we want. We want people to actually read the document, not just what people say about it. And this allows you to do that and understand what it's saying. So I think it's a great little book. So I'll put a link to that obviously in the show notes so people can buy that from Sophia, of course.
Absolutely.
So. Okay. Well, thanks a lot, Veronica. I really appreciate you being on the program.
Thank you so much, Eric. It was such a pleasure.
Yeah. Okay, everybody. Until next time, God love you.